just wanted to say, first of all, thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me that you take time out of your day to come here and support me and learn more about my campaign in abolition. First, I wanted to introduce myself politically. I've been an organizer for social justice on and off in this community since 2016 when Bernie Sanders ran for president. I worked on his campaign, and then after the execution of George Floyd in 2020 was radicalized and really had a personal racial justice awakening. And so I co-formed a group called SC Pop, which is Santa Cruz People Over Policing. It was a BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color group that worked to reduce the scope of policing and try to build up community care. So it was the start of working on abolition. I mean, that continues in a lineage of Angela Davis and Mariam Kaba, and this work's been done for a very long time. And then I was in Democratic Socialists of America in Santa Cruz, DSA, and I started the Racial Justice Working Group there. And I'm a member of Santa Cruz Cares, which you might have heard of, which advocates for the rights of the unhoused and for the unhoused to not be criminalized and be provided the services they need. I'm taking all of the trainings I can at the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County, taking de-escalation and conflict management. I'd like to take, I think in March they're offering the 40-hour mediation training so I could be a community mediator. Now, more personally, I moved here in 2014 to be closer to my mom, who is here. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the community. I serve underrepresented populations through taking a sliding scale, also through taking insurance, which is a really tricky thing for therapists because insurance don't pay us fairly and they often cause a lot of bureaucratic headache. But I do offer that, and I take Medi-Cal. So I really love being able to take Medi-Cal because they don't have any co-pays. I really think it should just work that way, where I get paid, decently, and then people don't have to pay out of pocket or anything, even a copay. So, and so through being a therapist, I've seen just how many people, like my clients, are being hurt by systemic failures. It's almost never an individual failing. So it's really not even super appropriate for therapy because I can support them, and that's important and hold the space. But a lot of what's failing them are systemic things, housing or healthcare or just basic needs. And so that's why I, fight for abolition, because I think we need a better world that lifts us all up. I'm autistic, and I'm very open about that in therapy and as running for city council. What that means for me is I don't know if you've heard the term WYSIWYG. I feel like it's dated now, but what you see is what you get. I'm very direct. I'm very honest. I actually can't lie. I just part of my autism. And I have a very strong value of justice that I've had since 5. I remember thinking at 5 years old, if I just thought hard enough, I could solve war. And I really just didn't understand why there's so much suffering in the world. I'm agender, use she, they pronouns. And it's actually more that I'm audi gender. That's not a gender identity, but it means my autism informs how I see my gender, which is, to me, I don't really understand gender. I just feel like we're all people and you can present however you want. And so I'm fine with any really pronouns, but that's just something that resonated with me is, okay, it's a social paradigm. I don't really know where I fit there. I'm transnational adoptee from Dhaka, Bangladesh, one of Mother Teresa's orphanages. I was adopted at 6 months. And also transracial because my mom's Black, my dad's half Bangladeshi, half Black. So I had a lot of, I had some connection to my culture of Bangladesh, but I identify a lot with the Black community. And then I've struggled through many personal and mental health challenges trying to figure out I was autistic. That only happened last year that I got diagnosed. I'm 36 right now. I was misdiagnosed and have just gone through a lot, which I feel has deepened my empathy and compassion. And I hope to bring a voice to others who feel othered or unheard or underrepresented. And so I'm an abolitionist. And so what is abolition? I want to clarify what it is, what it isn't, and then how I see it helping Santa Cruz. So I love this quote. If you've seen my website or my literature, it's usually on all that, but it's from Mariam Kaba. We do this till we free us. Abolition envisions a world where we address harm without relying on the violent systems that increase it. A world where we have everything we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more things that are foundational to our personal and community safety. And I think abolition is a social contract in which we all agree that we all deserve to exist. And I think if you feel like you should be allowed to be alive, and if you can't make enough money, you shouldn't just die, then I consider you an abolitionist in spirit, because that's what it means to me. A world where we can all thrive. And I think we need a culture of connection. Capitalism creates a lot of alienation. We don't even know like who makes our products. There's so many levels of alienation to that. And so I think we need to recultivate connection through a practice of empathy. I really do think it can start from the ground up with how we treat each other, really trying to hear each other. Politics has become so divisive with people just wanting to argue their point and dominate the other person. But that's why I love the Conflict Resolution Center, CRC, about stopping and listening to someone, identifying the underlying need that they have, and trying to work together. So what abolition is not, it's not that I'm going to go in there and demand an immediate disbanding of Santa Cruz Police Department or saying we should close the jails. Because abolition is a process whereby when we tear down old systems, we're building up new ones, and it needs to happen in parallel. And so we need services to meet people's needs. And abolition still, wants to create safety and protection from harm. So that's still important, but it's not like an all-in-one swoop. And why is it called abolition? I've realized it's now on my website. I had not addressed that. It's called abolition because it continues the work of abolition of slavery. It's abolishing modern slavery, which is policing, prisons, and with prisons, there's convict, leasing. They still do prison labor. After emancipation of slavery, a lot of Black people became imprisoned so that there was still a labor force. So it's just modern slavery. So policing, prisons, surveillance as well, and the wage. There's a way we're all enslaved in a sense with capitalism by having to make a wage to survive. And if you're disabled like me, like autistic, where I can't carry a full caseload, then I just don't get to live. So that's kind of what I think it's all about. And so I think for Santa Cruz, abolition is a guiding philosophy to me. It's a lens through which we can make policy, and it's a strategy of how to get there. I think we build up community care with neighborhood pods or activation networks. Could you imagine if you had a community where you knew who was in your community and someone got trained in de-escalation? Maybe you had a community mediator, and maybe someone else could be a safe house for if someone was experiencing domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And you could have a phone tree network to activate. You could have people trained in CPR. I myself am up to date with my CPR training, first aid, AED for pediatric, adolescents, and adults. I wish that's something we could all do. And I feel like services like that should be funded by the city. I think the city could help form these neighborhood pods by, funding, whether it's CRC coming out to train people, funding the first aid trainings, bringing more city waste receptacles to people instead of just criminalizing them. So that's kind of how I see it working here. And this would eventually reduce the need for police, because imagine if we had these community networks of care. That would be the first stop, is each other. We'd help take care of each other. So there'd be less need to call the police, because when you call the police, you're relying on someone with a lethal weapon who we know can mistake, the person who called for, a perpetrator. It's immense harm to Black and brown people, where often, I don't feel safe calling the police. I don't even feel safe around police. And so this would have a protection of community without, police showing up who are very intimidating and have, the ability to kill. So I know one big question people probably have is, well, how do we afford this? How can we actually get to abolition? And well, one thing I think is important to note is that money bubbles up right now to artificially increase land value. We all know housing is super expensive. Santa Cruz is one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. And so money is bubbling up to rent and to mortgages, which then goes to banks. And so I'd like to see us bring back, public housing, and not just Section 8 vouchers, because those are great for people where their income is, fixed and they have 30% they pay. But we're still supplementing with housing authority the rest of that money to pay a market rate. It's just not sustainable. And we had our Section 8 wait list closed for 10, it's 10 years long, and then it was closed entirely for a while. So I want to, bring back public housing, and then at least increase affordable housing and take out those in lieu fees where developers get to buy their way out of making these units. And then that's the question I always get. Well, how do we get developers to actually come build? They're not going to want to come build if there's too much affordable requirements. I personally think that we have to think outside the box. So what if the city could make up the difference with funds? And then you're asking where? I'd say from police. I am an abolitionist. I do think we reduce the scope and power and money of the police. And I do think their budget is overinflated. 80% of Santa Cruz Police Department's calls are for check or suspicious activity. And we've seen them on Instagram beg people to call them about abandoned vehicles or, give them basically work to do. When Food Not Bombs was feeding people in the storms, there were at least maybe 4 to 6 SUV cop cars show up with at least 8 officers to force food out bombs to leave. And they were just feeding people in a storm. So I think that's a waste of taxpayer money, of all of our money. And I think that money should go towards meeting people's basic needs. And so it should be invested in affordable housing or healthcare or just other things that people need. So stances I have on other issues are so I've talked a lot about housing and survivability, but I would work to decriminalize living in tents and vehicles. You know, I'm a member of Santa Cruz Cares, and I support the appeal of the oversized vehicle ordinance. I want to work to, if I get on city council, to repeal the CSSO, which is the Camping Services and Standards Ordinance, so that people can, live in tents. I think we should create a community land trust for permanently affordable housing. I'm a strong supporter of renter protection, so, just cause eviction and rent control. And I would support and work to expand outreach services like the Harm Reduction Coalition of Santa Cruz County and mutual aid programs. Because I know a lot of times when people are living in their vehicle or in tents, people say, oh, there's like trash or the gray water or the environmental impact or needles. And we can address that by bringing services to where the people are. If we brought receptacles, and we've seen this happen on Delaware, they use them. If you give them needle disposal sites, they use them. And so I just think we can do better, and we can just, again, start where people are already at. With labor, I support unions and workers' rights. I'm really happy to see Kaiser on strike. I want to develop an incentive program and support for forming cooperative businesses. I think we need a transition plan for older small local businesses to transition to cooperatives by right of first refusal going to the workers. And just sort of like broadening how we think about, labor. I believe in transformative justice. I know there's a lot of discussion of restorative justice, transformative. I think transformative justice believes in the ability for people to rehabilitate and then reintegrate into society. It's not punitive. It comes from a caring place. You do protect the community from the person who did harm, and then they have a path back. And then part of transformative justice is including the indigenous community and, having solidarity, making sure to hear their comments on things. I mean, they've been so left out of conversations, and we're on their land. I mean, we have to work together and make sure their needs are being met and their voices are being heard. Especially as an autistic person, I'm very, very strongly in support of disability justice. I want to work to increase accommodations. I think we need more thoughtfulness for accessibility of resources, increased access for people to participate in civic engagement. And then for environmental justice, I think it is important that whatever we do, we consider sustainable practices. And I think we need to balance that with the need to build affordable housing and people's need to exist and survive. I really think climate change is a problem that's much bigger than just Santa Cruz. It is really, there are bigger picture players in climate change. And, we need to really tackle that at a global level of things like fossil fuels and, people who have private jets and things like that. Like we can do what we can in Santa Cruz, but that's going to not make a huge difference. We need a global change in how we do things. But here, what we could do is expand environmentally friendly services like hardcore compost. I love that program. And then have climate mitigation plans for low-income communities. I think Beach Flats should get to their community garden back and should get to reestablish that. Transportation is another issue I hear that a lot of people care about, and I would fight to increase the number of buses, the number of bus drivers, and reduce the wait between buses throughout the city. I've heard a lot of people, if they can't get on a bus because it's full, have to wait an hour for the next bus, and that's just not a sustainable system. And I want to work to improve bike and pedestrian safety because that really is an issue, and we want everyone in our community to be safe. And so that brings me to safety. So as we build up alternative systems of care, I would work to demilitarize for sure. And, Santa Cruz Police Department, there's no need for them to have a tank, the Bearcat, and just like military grade equipment and they can use chemical warfare against protesters, which I do not stand for. And the goal is to reallocate these police funds to social programs. And it's proactive prevention rather than reactive punishment. And the ultimate goal is to close jails and prisons. But again, once we have alternative solutions to protecting people from harm. So it's not like we just close them. We have to have alternative systems. For healthcare, I would see if we could implement a citywide Medicare for all, or at least keep fighting statewide. There's no reason we should not have Medicare for all in the state. It's unfortunate with the Democratic supermajority that still didn't happen. And I would fight for increased access to mental health services. I mean, I hear people look for a therapist and they reach out to 60, 100 therapists, hear nothing back. My colleagues and I have wait lists, we're booked. There's a lot of people who don't take insurance, like I said, because of the lack of actual parity. And the reproductive justice is key, and there needs to be access to all reproductive health rights. In terms of education in schools, I want to find an alternative to the school resource officers. There have been data showing they do more harm than good, and I want to be able to still keep our kids safe in schools, but we just need to reimagine what that looks like. SROs often target people of color and the same people over and over, and just like it's a school to prison pipeline, so that's not the answer. We need more mental health counselors on campus. I would advocate for socio-emotional workshops or assemblies for people to learn conflict management skills. And I believe we can and should provide free internet for all. So that's something that I think would be really important. Now, a lot of people want to know about the new jail and what I think. And I don't know if you saw the article in Lookout, but I did get to weigh in on that. I am against spending $200 million on consultants and a new jail. I agree there are literal crimes against humanity and atrocities happening in our main jail. And I do not want that. I want improved conditions for people who are incarcerated. I just think we could do that by reallocating spending to improve conditions in the jail, as opposed, especially as the population is decreased from COVID and everything. And so we don't need more money going to another carceral solution. That money would be much better used to meet people's needs and fund these social services I've been talking about. It was horrifying for me to learn that people get thrown in jail who are on substances and have to detox in jail with literally not the right healthcare, because as a therapist, I know if you're on heroin, if you're even on alcohol and you're trying to detox, you can die if you don't get treatment. And people are dying in the jails. Like literally in our jails, there have been over 10 deaths of people detoxing in there without care. So those are some of my stances. The way you could support me if you like what I'm saying, check out my website, jazzforsantacruz.com. I would love your support, whether it's financially with donations, any little bit counts. That's how we can get things like the mailers out and this message out, or volunteer. We could use volunteers to help me canvass. We have the QR code on the table for donating. There's also this great resource, Abolition 101 video, I highly recommend. And then Stop Cop City, which I'm not going to go into right now, but it's an amazing movement that you should look into that is abolition happening in our time in Atlanta, Georgia. And my most important endorsement is really yours, the people's. So if you could go on my website under the endorsements tabs, there's a place to put your input, and I'd love to hear from you. This phase of campaigning is information gathering to hear what you, the people of Santa Cruz, think and are the top issues. In closing, we have the tools to create an abolitionist world. We just need to use the tools we have to raise up the bottom of society. I don't have all the answers, and it will be a process that unfolds as we do it. But we need to do it because it is a goal so worth getting to. In that way, I really think abolitionists are people who haven't given up on the world. And I wanted to end with my sonnet that I just wrote on abolition the other day. It's called I Dream of a World. I dream of a world of abolition, where everybody is housed and well fed. We'll have no more need for ammunition, and our lives will be community-led. By ensuring all of us can survive, there will be fewer desperate acts of harm, because in this new world we can all thrive, setting aside most causes for alarm. We'll get there by reducing policing and using that funding for social good. Our efforts will need to be unceasing, so prepare for staunch resistance, we should. Let's start now with the culture of caring. For this suffering, we can't keep bearing. So thank you again for attending, and thank you for listening to what I have to say.